Bit of a different stream. We're going to start off. So I have a game queued up here. This is a game from I believe this was the semifinals of a UK league that was played a bit ago. I believe this one was sometime before Christmas, so a little bit of slightly older footage, but it features me on Warrior playing against BigMedSi on Ninja. However, before we do that, I want to do a quick discussion as LSS has posted some information with respect to Monarch. So, as you guys may know, Monarch is the upcoming set of Flesh and Blood TCG. It is the next set, and it should be fairly interesting. The set is going to come out in April. They have released the product sheet on their website, so if you go to FABTCG.com, you'll be able to see this. I am not pulling this up here right now because I do not know how to stream a PDF, but the information there is fairly basic but still has some interesting stuff. It looks like the art, it shows you got kind of an angel fighting a devil or something, and or an angel fighting a demon. I don't know exactly how you'd characterize it, but they are saying, most relevantly, there are going to be 6 legendary cards in this set instead of 5. There's still going to be a Fabled card. There's going to be a bunch of new equipment. There's going to be back to a larger pack. It's going to be back to a 15 card pack relative to the 10 card pack of Crucible. So, maybe that 10 card pack was just a little thing that they were doing for those supplemental sets, and the 15 card pack is going to be the standard. It is designed, I believe, to be draftable. And interestingly, they have a little bit more information. There's going to be some Blitz decks that are ready to play with each of the new heroes, and there are going to be 4 new heroes in the set. So it says Monarch is a standalone booster set introducing 4 new heroes, all new mechanics to play out the classic conflict of light versus shadow across sealed deck, booster, draft, and constructed formats. So 4 new characters. This is something that I think has been very very uncertain in the community, whether or not they were going to be adding new classes, how many heroes they might add. I'd heard some people talking about how they hoped that, I've heard some people talking about how they hoped that Monarch would not add new classes, but would only add new heroes. I'd heard some people, talking about how they hoped that it would be new classes so that none of the existing classes would be advantaged. But regardless, if it is 4 and only 4 new heroes, that does mean that they aren't going to be doing a new hero for every class, which in my opinion at least implies that there are going to be new classes in the set. And that's not confirmed. They just said new heroes, not new classes, but I personally think that this information indicates that it's pretty likely they are going to be releasing Monarch, and it's going to have 4 new character classes, and we're going to have to see what's going on with that. So I think it should be fairly interesting to see what's going on with that set. In terms of my hopes for it, I'm hoping that we're going to have a good set for the limited play experience. One of the things that I most like about card game events just in stores is drafting. Drafts can be a lot of fun, or limited play can be a lot of fun. And I think that not all the sets that they've had have been able to do that. If you're playing Crucible of War, that set is really not optimized for drafting. You could try it, but I don't think it would work very well. And so Monarch is going to be set up for that, which I think is really cool. And that's a form of gameplay that I think hasn't had as much emphasis in Flesh and Blood because the virus situation has made it unsafe. I personally think that something like this is pretty interesting in terms of the future prospect as a way to get more people into the game, especially on the local level. Though, because I think the virus situation will not be fully resolved, it's possible that we won't see the full impact of this with Monarch, and maybe not even until the next set or later. In any case, though, I'm excited to hear about that. 4 new heroes, that sounds like it could be cool. I don't know what those heroes are going to be. I don't know what classes they're going to be from. They haven't confirmed 4 new hero classes. I think it's possible and maybe even likely that they're going to do that, or that they might have hybrid heroes who can have cards from multiple classes, or I don't know exactly what they're going to do. but it should be interesting to see how that pans out. Also, the fact that they have 6 legendaries in Monarch is very interesting to me, and the reason that's interesting is the previous big sets have had 5 legendaries. This could actually mean that the ratio at which you get a legendary in each pack may increase if they keep it like they did with Crucible of War, where they're going to have each legendary having the same draw chance across sets, because you would be going for a set that had 6 instead of 5. However, I haven't heard any confirmation on that. Haven't done any real in-depth analysis. In any case, though, it means that there is more than just one legendary for each new hero plus a neutral. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. I think it's quite possible to have 2 neutral legendaries, one for leg, one for arms, and then fill out generic neutrals in all slots. But we'll have to see what happens there. All right, well, those are my quick thoughts on the Monarch update, and now we're going to get to the actual gameplay part of the video. So, yeah, this one was played some time ago, me versus BigMedSi. And so I'm playing a somewhat older version of my Dorinthia deck, and I am playing against Katsu here. This is a classic constructed game. And yeah, let's see what happens. So I'm starting with my normal item loadout. Got the Arcanite Skullcap, Find All Spring Tunic, Brave Forge Bracers, Refraction Bolters. That's going to be my defense against the ninja there. And I'm going first, and I don't have anything that's all that cool on the first turn, so I actually just decide to Arsenal and pass. And this is a move that I like to make sometimes when I'm going first if I don't feel like I can be necessarily that threatening. And the thing that I like about the Arsenal pass first turn is that it doesn't really give the opponent an option. It doesn't really give the opponent an option to mulligan by defending with cards that they don't want for their first turn, maybe overblocking. I'm taking a look at my sideboard there to see what I did. And then it's still going to allow me to, get a counter on my Tunic before my opponent does and put a card in Arsenal. So not the greatest thing to do with a first turn. What I'd really like to do is play an energy potion or, do Flock of the Featherwalkers, so I'll have that quicken token or something like that. But yeah. So my opponent leads off with a Surging Strike, and I decided to just let it hit me. There's a Surging Strike for 4. I figure, okay, whatever. And he is going to use Katsu's ability and get rid of a Rising Knee Thrust to get a card, which I presume is going to be a copy of Whelming Gust Wave, and then he'll come in with the second part of that combo. I think that the typical ninja play pattern that you often see is people leading off with Kadachi Pokes and then going into attacks. In this case, he led off with the Surging Strike instead. I decided to just let that hit. I'm not entirely worried about it. It does give him a Katsu trigger, which can allow him to get part of his combo. But I have a lot of, I still have a lot of defense here. I have a bunch of cards. I have my armor. So I'm not entirely worried about this coming in and overwhelming me. So my opponent is searching, I think. Yeah. And I think it's going to be Whelming. It's probably going to be red Whelming if he has it. So one of the things about these ninja decks is that it can be important to... Oh, no, it's actually Megenshi. Okay, so what this tells me is that he has the next part. So he has the Whelming in hand. And he does indeed play a red Whelming. And so he's going to follow this up with Megenshi under ideal circumstances. But actually... in this situation, I'm thinking my opponent has made an error because he doesn't have any energy left, nor does he have any cards in hand, as far as I can tell. And because of that, he isn't going to have the opportunity to actually play that Megenshi because it costs 1 if I can block his Whelming Gust Wave and prevent him from getting the draw. So in this situation, blocking that Whelming Gust Wave is high priority, and I think I double block it. Yeah, so I used a card plus Skullcap. And so I'm actually blocking for 5, and the reason that I block for 5 is that if I block for only 4 here, with, let's say I blocked with that route plus the bolters, my opponent could trigger his Breaking Scales to give himself +1 and get in, which would then give him a card draw and allow him to play the next step of his combo. So in that case, over-blocking his attack by 1 allows me to avoid the potential Breaking Scales and prevent him from playing that Megenshi release, which he had banished from his deck with Katsu's ability. So then I'm going to play the Spoils of War that I had in Arsenal coming in there. And this turn, I don't have like some extra thing to do after this attack, but I do have a nice copy of Iron Song Response in hand, which I can use to try to get in over a block. And since my opponent doesn't have a card in Arsenal, I'm not worried about a potential move from a defense reaction that I can't respond to with a Iron Song response. So one of the weaknesses of Warrior is that the reprise mechanic, which features on some of their best attack reactions, does only trigger if the opponent has blocked from hand. So in some cases, the opponent can just say, okay, I'm going to put a defense reaction in Arsenal, not block, and then defend against this only with things not from hand, so your reprise isn't live. So when your opponent doesn't have a card in Arsenal, that's often a happy time for the Warrior player. So I end up here using my Braveforge Bracers by pitching that Glint the Quicksilver and coming in again for a second attack for 4 after my opponent lets the first one in. So I have 2 copper now, and then this attack for 4 is going to threaten a +1 counter on my Dawnblade if it isn't stopped. And I have the Iron Song response in hand to try to confirm the hit if my opponent blocks without overblocking it. Now, in this situation, you might want to overblock to 7, but that's itself an awkward number. He could block with 2 cards plus a piece of equipment, maybe, but he is running a combo ninja deck. So one of the things to note about ninja decks that involve using the core combos from the Welcome to Wraith set is that those combos involve cards that block for 2 early on, and actually some of the best ninja cards are the combo starters with unconditional go again, and those cards do actually cost 2. And because those combo starters cost 2, or I'm sorry, they block for 2. And because those combo starters block for 2, that's not going to be an opportunity for you to do very well on the defense against Warrior, because Warrior is so good at attacking. And it can really be a dangerous situation, in my opinion, if you have too many cards that block for 2. And so we see here he has to block. He wants to block this attack, and he actually blocks it for 3, 4, 5. He blocks it for 7, so he does do the overblock. And he has to use 3 cards to do it because 2 of them block for 2, whereas in other circumstances he could have blocked with 2 cards that block for 3, and then maybe his Breaking Scales, which would allow him to shut down the attack without having to use that extra card and get him a little more tempo. On the other hand, he may have done this intentionally. He may have been trying to save his equipment for later on, but I'm pretty happy about that because even though I didn't get my Dawnblade counter, I did disrupt his tempo substantially. So now I'm looking at my hand in this situation. So it's conceivable that this would be a situation where I would actually want to use the copper token for a draw because I have 3 blues in hand, but I think it's more likely that it would be good to do like, I don't know, play blue hit and run, pitch the Iron Song response, swing for 3, um, you know, and then follow up with the E-Strike. But I do actually decide to use copper in this case. I'm thinking that's not necessarily the most aggressive turn. Like, it's not terrible, but I end up wanting to use the copper. So I pitch for 6 and use it, and I do get a Razor Reflex, which is pretty nice here. So now I think I may go for E-Strike 7 and then try to Razor it. Which is kind of a cool play there. Could let me threaten a lot of damage if things go right, and we will see if they do. We were playing this game, as many of these games are played, by voice, I believe, so we don't have the chat to explain exactly what I'm doing. But based on that draw, I suspect that I am going for an E-Strike 7, and then my plan is to use the Razor Reflex to buff it up to 10, give it go again on hit, and then if that hits, I can follow up with a Dawnblade swing. And this is a rare situation where you see the copper token actually being used. So the main benefit of that copper token is that it is a card where if you're at 4 energy, if you're at 4 energy, you can discard a copper token and use that to draw a card. So in this situation, I'm deciding that it's going to be, because I had so much blue in hand, I want to get a little more option. And I do draw that red Razor, which allows me to do this cool combo. Another card that would have been nice to see would be, another Spoils of War would be pretty awesome. or a copy of even a Red Warrior's Valor, since I have that Iron Song response, could potentially be very threatening. Um, my opponent is thinking over how he wants to respond to this attack, and we'll see what he does. It's an interesting situation here when someone comes in with the E-Strike 7. Sometimes that's just damage. In this case, I could have the Razor, which makes it like, but are you really going to overblock to 10 just in case? I think the best situation for him would be that if he had a defense reaction that he could defend against and then play, like defend for 6, and then when I play Razor, he plays a reaction for 4, so he blocks all 10. But in this case, he does not block it, and then I do have the Razor to hit him for 10, and then come in with the Dawnblade for another 3. So the life totals are now 36 to 25, and I'm threatening another 3 damage there with the leftover resource. So this is, in my opinion, a pretty good situation for me. On the other hand, when Ninja lets you hit them with a bunch of stuff, it sometimes means they have a big combo coming. He does block out the Dawnblade swing, and I opt not to use the Iron Song response. I want to save that for a situation where I'm threatening the Dawnblade counter. And I now see a hand that will allow me to do something very strong and aggressive. In theory, I could play the play the Spoils of War swing, and if my opponent doesn't shut it down from Arsenal, I could potentially come in with multiple Iron Song responses. Okay, so then it looks like we have a plunder run coming in here. So Plunder Run being played from Arsenal, so it is going to give the attack a boost, and it is also going to get, it's a red Plunder Run, so next time an attack action he controls hits, he draws a card, and then it will give his next attack action card +3, and then he pitches a blue Plunder Run and comes in with a Kadachi Poke, which I'm just going to let hit me, so I take a point of damage. And the cool thing about my hand here is that I can actually do a pretty threatening version of this hand without having to use all the cards. So I can comfortably block with 2 cards here. The red Iron Song and the yellow Hit and Run are nice to have, but non-essential for my plan. So if I block with those cards, I can still do my main plan of coming in with pitch overpower, play spoils, swing Dawnblade. So in this scenario, it is going to be the case that I have a fair amount to defend against his potential Plunder Run attack with. But first he's going to be doing more Kadachi pokes. So second Kadachi poke. There's an argument for blocking this with equipment, and it is what I choose to do. The reason that I block this one is that often blocking that second attack can be the most reliable way to prevent a ninja from triggering Mask of Momentum. So to trigger Mask of Momentum and get that free draw, they need to land 3 attacks in a row. And often I found that one of the best ways to stop them is going to be to block the second of the 3 attacks, and then even if the third one hits, you will be able to survive. So then he's going to come in here with the Surging Strike after using his Fyendal Spring Tunic, and this is going to be buffed by the Plunder Run, and I think it may be Strength 8, and if it hits draw a card, it has Go Again, and that's very scary. Now, I can try to stop this. One thing that I could do is I could double block with the non-essential cards and then also throw in my Brave Forge Bracers, and that would block for a total of 8. There is a risk that he would have a Ancestral Empowerment in hand and just blow me up, but we'll have to see what I choose to do here. So I guess it was a yellow E-Strike, so it was actually coming in for only 7. I decide, I'm sorry, not E-Strike, Surging Strike. And I decide, okay, I'm going to let that hit me, and then I am going to go into my next turn with a more aggressive situation. But it's definitely a bit painful. Luckily, I have the life advantage to be able to take that. My opponent follows up by playing an Energy Potion, which is, it's not terrible, but I'm not horrified by that. I think if he kept comboing, it would actually be more annoying for me. But the Energy Potion is going to allow him to defend more in the future while still doing something good. However, Energy Potion is kind of interesting for a ninja because one of the downsides is that if you use Energy Potion, it does not count as having pitched a 0-cost card for your Kadachi. And as a result of that, you can't use it to fuel the start of your turn in the way that you can with some other classes because you really need to pitch a 0-cost card in order to get those Kadachi to have Go Again. So in this situation, I am going to go for my play, and I have all those things to support it. Now, what I really hope I don't see is like Unmovable from Arsenal. Unmovable from Arsenal would be really strong here. because it would allow him to shut down my attack without enabling the reprise. The downside of my attack plan is that those Iron Song responses, the one that I have in hand and the one that I have in arsenal, they do require him to have blocked with a card from hand to be enabled. So I really would prefer him to block with a card from hand, because then I'm going to be in a position where I have this really strong zero cost attack reaction. But this is kind of risky because if he only blocks with equipment and or stuff from arsenal, I'm actually not going to be able to do very much about it, despite having a pretty cool attack plan. So in this case, he blocks with a breaking scales, which is going to be 1, and then a red unmovable, but the unmovable is from hand. So he blocks for a total of 8 against my 5. I can actually break through this, though, and I choose to do so. I'm going to play both of the Iron Song responses. So he overblocks by 3, but I go up by 6. So now I'm going to hit him for 3 unless he has a defense reaction, and then I can play the yellow hit and run for the stats, and then swing again for 5, which is going to be difficult for him to defend against and will likely put me on strongly in an advantage for tempo. Now, if he has another defense reaction, he can use it now and shut down this attack. But then, I'm also kind of fine with that. I'll just arsenal the hit and run and get ready for next turn. Once again, his tempo will be pretty limited. So I'm feeling pretty good about this situation, and it's interesting how much worse this turn was for my opponent because the unmovable was in hand instead of arsenal. If that had been an unmovable from arsenal, it would have been much more disruptive to me, and I would have felt a lot worse about keeping those cards rather than blocking last turn. Fortunately for me, it was an unmovable from hand. So that's one of the things, if you're playing against Warrior, having a defense reaction in arsenal is one of the strongest things that you can do, in my opinion, and it can really give them some frustration in situations where you can deny reprise, though of course there's the chance that they're going to have one of the 1 cost plus 3 attack reactions. So you have Razor Reflex, you have Out for Blood, and you have Stroke of Foresight, all cards that cost 1 energy and give you plus 3 on their reds without requiring reprise. Now, Stroke of Foresight and Out for Blood do have bonus effects that are based on reprise, but in order to get those bonuses, you would need them to have blocked with that card from hand. But those bonuses are not actually crucial. You can get the plus 3 stats just by playing the card. Actually, Route is similar. So Route is 2 for Strength 3, and then you have the opportunity to send a card that they blocked with back to their hand, but that only is going to apply if the opponent did block with a card from hand and trigger reprise. So in this case, I actually decided to go even bigger. So not only do I play the yellow hit and run, I also use my Tunic to use bolters so that I can come in for 6 damage instead of 5. Which is additionally annoying for a ninja. There is that chance that he's going to have if he has 1 card in hand that blocks for 3 and 1 that blocks for 2, the fact that I'm coming in for 6 instead of 5 now means that he's going to have to use a piece of equipment in addition to a double block if he wants to stop me. So in this case, it's actually very interesting. He has a second unmovable, but he has to not only pitch his only card in hand, but also use his potion in order to pay for it. So it does shut me down on that second attack. I'm not going to get a Dawnblade counter, but honestly, I'm quite happy with this outcome because it means that my opponent has no cards at all for his next turn and doesn't have his potion, so his next turn is just probably going to be to draw up and pass. Maybe he has something he can play from arsenal, maybe not. But I'm pretty happy with this situation because my tempo is still going. And so we see the opponent, just drawing up. He actually forgets to put a counter on Tunic. And then I am going to have a hit and run turn. So hit and run, pitch this blue shunt, attacking with the Dawnblade for 3. With go again, and if my opponent blocks this, I can follow up with a Flock of the Feather Walkers, which is going to come in for 5, give me a Quicken token. It will reveal my Scar for a Scar, which is not optimal, but the Scar in Archive or in Arsenal is not going to be a big problem. Little fun fact, I sometimes think of Arsenal as being called Archive because that was the name, I believe, of the Corp discard pile in Netrunner. I don't know if any of you guys played Netrunner, but that was a game that I quite enjoyed back in the day. This is, I'm not so far back in the day. I am talking the Android Netrunner LCG and not the original Wizards of the Coast CCG Netrunner. But Netrunner LCG was a lot of fun. I think it was one of the strongest card games I've played in some ways. Not without its foibles. I know some people who were not happy with how asymmetric it was. Like I knew some people who really liked runner but didn't like corp, or I think actually usually it was people who liked corp but not runner, and that did have its problems at times, but overall that was a really fun game. So my opponent does block using a torrent of tempo, and I follow up with, as predicted, the Flock of the Featherwalkers giving me that quicken token and coming in for 5 damage. So 5 damage here with Flock of the Featherwalkers, pretty threatening. I like this red Flock. It's a little awkward to play with the fact that you have to reveal a card from hand, but the fact that it not only gives you a quicken token to set up your next turn, but it also does 5 damage, which is a fairly threatening attack, is that just really goes well in my opinion. The idea of playing a potion that's going to build you up for the future, but it also kind of uses all your tempo and doesn't threaten the opponent. Sometimes playing that potion can still be good, of course, but it's not always something that's actually threatening. And then the Flock of the Featherwalkers, on the other hand, is going to be threatening in that it's also putting out some damage as well as building you up for the future. Though the downside is the quicken token has to be used on your next attack. So sometimes you get situations where your next attack would have had go again anyway, and the quicken is kind of wasted. So my opponent double blocks this, and I'm actually really happy to see that. The thing about Flock of the Featherwalkers is that it's just damage. So my opponent blocks, I believe, with 2 copies of Surging Strike, which does mean that he only takes 1 damage from the Flock, but it also means his options are going to be more limited. However, it's possible that he had bad pitch, and those expensive Surging Strikes weren't going to be practical. Okay, and so we see that I do have a Spoils of War, and also that I have an all-red hand. Not the finest situation, but I think I'm going to be able to make something of it. My opponent is just going to pass, so I have this quicken token. So one thing I could do is I could play the Scar for a Scar that I have in my arsenal, and even though I have higher life, it will have go again thanks to the quicken token. So I do go for that first. That's a nice 0-cost attack. And then I can follow this up with the Ravenous Rebel that I have in my hand, which will also have go again. And then I can actually pitch my remaining 2 cards and throw out a CNC. So that would be 3 attacks ending with a CNC, and pretty strong in my opinion, even though it was an all-red hand. So I reveal a Twinning Blade with my Rabbles. That's only going to be a Strength 3 Rabble. Ideally, you do want to have that hit a red card and come in for 4, or, truly ideally, you hit Garganian Tome and come in for 5, but I'm not playing Garganian Tome. And so this one's just coming in for 4 damage instead. So we'll see how BigMedSi replies. I'm sorry, this one's only coming in for 3 damage, and the maximum I have is 4 damage, rather than the maximum being 5 damage. But over half my deck is red, so more often than not, that Ravenous Rebel is going to be coming in for the 4 damage with Go Again, which is pretty sweet. So my opponent goes for a single block, and I follow up with the double pitch into CNC, coming in for 6. Hard card for Ninja to defend against because of those 2 blocks. And if he does not defend this, it is going to come in there and break his arsenal, so we'll see what happens. 6 damage incoming. My opponent is, I think, in this situation, kind of thinking over what to do. Command and Conquer is definitely a card that often forces a tough decision. And so we'll have to see what exactly is going to happen here. Overall, I'm feeling pretty happy about this turn. I threatened a total of 13 damage plus a powerful on-hit effect, and did it in several chunks. Now, in this situation, my hope is that my opponent has some defense reaction, an arsenal that he wants to keep, and is going to have to block heavily. And we see those cards that block for 2 being to his detriment here. He blocks with a 3 block, a 2 block, and a piece of equipment. And that is something that I definitely like to see. If the opponent just blocks with 2 3 blocks, that itself is often a good outcome in that you took away a lot of tempo. But if the opponent has to block with 3 cards or with 2 cards plus equipment or whatever because they have 2 blocks in hand, that's a scenario that you're happier about. My opponent accidentally draws an extra card there. I think what happened here is that he decided he was just going to draw up, and he hit 4, so he drew 4 cards. A easy mistake to make on Tabletop Simulator, quite frankly. So in this situation, my hand doesn't have an inherent go again, but I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in with the Dawnblade, and I can potentially use if my opponent blocks this attack, I can play the Singing Steelblade that I have in hand and use it to get a glint, and then come in with go again. And if my opponent doesn't block, I can potentially trigger my Refraction Bolters and then make another attack. And Refraction Bolters are a really strong item. You can block with them early, and then later on you can discard them to give your Dawnblade that go again in a crucial moment. And unlike cards like Snapdragon Scalers, you don't have to commit to it until you know that the attack has hit. And because you don't have to commit to it until you know that the attack has hit, you're in that situation where you're going to be able to use it when you know that you're going to get Dorinthia's ability as well. So you know that you're going to be able to get that next Dawnblade attack. It can also be a good card with Kasai. Usually with Kasai, it's, you're going to use it to get another sword swing, or maybe even use it after your second sword swing hits in order to play a generic attack. So I do think it's stronger for Dorinthia than it is for Kasai, but I think that it is definitely a good card for Kasai too. If you're interested in hearing more with respect to Kasai, I recently published an article over at TowerNumberNine.com that has more detail on how I play Kasai. And additionally, that article has a video that I streamed on here earlier, which is now uploaded on YouTube, that has me playing 3 games with Kasai in just a small online Play Anywhere event. It was just like 3 rounds of Swiss or whatever. I played Kasai and recorded my games and what was going on there, so you can see the deck in action as well. Okay, so my opponent is going to block. So he goes for a single block there, and then that means I'm going to get this opportunity to do Singing Steelblade, and then I'm going to search for a glint and play the glint. So this is going to give me +1, which will get me in over his block right now, so I'll have to play a defense reaction if he wants to stop me. And then additionally, the glint, the Quicksilver that I'm going to go and try and find, is going to allow me to go again and also draw me a card. And then if he does play a defense reaction to stop me, I can follow up with the copy of Snatch that I have in hand, so I'm still doing extra threat. If he doesn't do that, of course, I will be able to come in with aggressive Dawnblade play. And I'm pretty sure I still have glints. Yep, there's a glint. Sometimes you play this card and you're missing some stuff and you don't realize it, and you're like, oh, I have to search for something worse. But in this case, I do have those glints. It can be a good idea to check your discard pile before playing Singing Steelblade, just to ensure that you are not, in fact, missing a key card. But of course, checking your discard pile can be a potential tell to your opponent that you have it. So, just something to consider. Sully G Dog says, "Great to catch a game." Yeah, man. Happy to be out here streaming. We'll see what happens. So in this situation, I decide that I'm going to I'm going to pitch the Springboard Somersault that I drew, use Braveforge Bracers to get the +1, and then swing for 4. So I'm coming in now for 4, and my opponent is in a slightly awkward spot. He's got his equipment that he actually wants to block with has now been used. He only has 2 pieces of equipment that you really want to be making blocks with as a ninja, because the Fyendal Spring Tunic and the Mask of Momentum are not they are not battle worn. They're blade break, and you don't really want to use those items. So I'm going to so he blocks for 3. So I actually play a glint, which is going to give me go again and draw a card, so that now I'll be able to play this Snatch afterwards, in order to threaten my opponent with some more damage. Although it looks like I'm forgetting to draw the card, or maybe I'm just seeing if he has anything before this resolves. Yeah, so he does not, and I do draw the card. And so now I am actually going to hit him for 1 and get my Dawnblade counter if he doesn't stop me. But he does stop me with a Flick Flack, so that attack is going to get shut down, but I will be able to follow up with either Snatch or a Scar for a Scar. So Snatch has the on-hit effect, Scar for a Scar does not. The on-hit effect of Snatch might not be all that good, because a card draw in this situation might just give me another card that I don't want to put in my arsenal over Scar for a Scar, but it could give me like another Springboard Somersault or something like that, which would be really cool. It's also a little bit more threatening, so more likely to make him block. He does have the Flick Flack, so he'll be able to block it easily with one card if the card in his hand has combo, but that's going to be okay in my view, and I do follow up with Snatch. So if my opponent stops this, I'll just put Scar in our arsenal, and if my opponent doesn't stop this, I'll get a card and hopefully draw something better than Scar to put in arsenal. He does not block. I draw a card. It's a Ravenous Rebel. So these cards are really very similar to put in arsenal, as they are both strength 4. They're both potentially strength 4 zero cost go again attacks. I do end up putting the Ravenous Rebel in arsenal instead of the Scar because it is more reliable, since I'm significantly ahead of my opponent on this point in life total. If I play, I decide that the Scar for a Scar is less likely to be strong, and I keep the Ravenous Rebel in case I have the. I keep the Ravenous Rebel in case I have to block with one of the cards. I would rather block with the Scar. So my opponent does the 2 Kadachi attack, and in this case, I'm fine with not blocking both. Because he does not seem to have a card that he can follow up with for a third hit. He does follow up with a Razor Reflex from Arsenal, but I'm happy to just take that damage. And actually, I feel like that's a pretty good spot for me now because I know that he doesn't have anything in Arsenal, which means Reprise is going to be enabled, and I'm going to be able to have a fairly aggressive turn here. So I'm going to pitch. I pitch the Overpower, pitch the second Overpower, and trigger a copper token, drawing a card, and I now have a double hit and run combo, which can conceivably be strong, as you can use hit and run, swing with the Dawnblade for go again, and then play the second hit and run to buff the next attack. I end up leading off with the Ravenous Rabble that I have in hand. It reveals a Somersault, so I'm coming in for 3. Now, one thing I'll say about this is, in retrospect, I'm not sure why I used the copper token here. I think that it might have been a good idea to just keep the copper token, keep the 2 unmovables, pitch one of them, and potentially try to actually play the other one. I don't know that it was necessary to go for the copper here. So I could have done, pitch one, play hit and run, swing for 3 with go again, still have 2 floating, and then potentially use the Tunic to play the second one and still have other pitch and stuff left over to come in with another Dawnblade attack. So I do think that if I were playing this turn again, I might play a little differently. I'm not sure that using the copper in that scenario was necessary, but we'll have to see what happens. So right now, though, my Ravenous Rebel is coming in for 3 damage here, and Ravenous Rebel at the start of the attack can be pretty annoying in that your opponent has to decide, do I want to let this hit me and take significant damage, or do I want to save my cards to block his potential main attack? And in this case, my main attack is not even necessarily that good, so I'm fine with my opponent not blocking and getting hit by the Ravenous Rabble, but because of the threat of attack reactions getting in over a block and so on, often an opponent decides to conserve resources and try to stop the main thing. Scar for a Scar, leading off a combat chain when you're lower life can be a similar strategy. Alright, so right now the Dawnblade's coming in for 3 with go again, and my opponent is down to only 9 life. I am at 23, and I do have more armor left than my opponent as well, as he currently has 3 armor left. He has 2 from his mask, 1 from his tunic. And I have 3 left from my bracers alone, plus the tunic, plus potentially another one. My opponent ends up playing a Flick Flack to stop this attack, and then I'm going to follow up with that Scar for a Scar. Even though my Dawnblade attack got stopped, I can still make an attack. It's interesting to note here that I could have played the red hit and run to give the next attack plus 3 and then played it, but in this situation it didn't necessarily seem like it was all that good. And my opponent may just block this, but then if he doesn't, he'll take some damage, and regardless of whether he does or doesn't block it, I will be able to put hit and run in Arsenal and get set up for the next turn. So he does block it, and he actually blocks it completely because he does have that defense buff from Flick Flack, and he blocks with a combo card. So now I'm going to draw up. My opponent only has a 2-card turn, and we will see what happens here. Looks like it's a pitching a leg tap and using his tunic to play a CNC, coming in for 6 damage. And in this situation, so I have a hit and run in Arsenal. Honestly, I could just let this hit me because I can do something quite aggressive without that hit and run. And I don't know that it's necessarily worth using stuff to preserve it, but we'll have to see what I choose to do. Yeah, I'm just going to take the damage. And then on my turn, I can pitch the Steel Blade Shunt and then do hit and run plus Supremacy, and then put the Springboard Somersault in Arsenal. Another option would be to not play the hit and run in order to like bluff more that I have a reaction, and it looks like that's actually what I'm gonna do here. So I'm not gonna play the hit and run, and this is going to allow me to. I can still get the go again if I hit, thanks to Brave Forge or thanks to the refraction bolters. So just coming in for the swing is going to be more threatening and might cause an overblock because I have the 2 cards in hand. So my opponent is in fact going to overblock. He overblocks at 8, and because I do now, in theory, I could still get in if I have a route and overpower or a copy of what's it called, Singing Steelblade into Iron Song Response, which could all give me 4 or more buff. But I do not have that. However, I'm quite happy to have my opponent's turn basically shut down. I put a Springboard Somersault in Arsenal. My opponent comes in with Scar for a Scar. And I think in this situation, I can just block it with the Springboard Somersault that I have in Arsenal and block it completely. And then I can do and then I can do pitch blue, hit and run, play yellow, hit and run, Dawnblade 3, follow up with a E-Strike, which is a pretty solid turn, I think. Dawnblade 3, he'll likely block that, and then I get to throw out E-Strike 7. I could also use Tunic, though, to keep that card in hand, and I do end up doing that. This is useful because if he lets this attack in, I can play the yellow hit and run and swing for Dawnblade again at Strength 5. Potentially pitching more, actually, to use the... potentially pitching the Springboard Somersault to use Brave Forge Bracers and actually come in for 4 instead. So once again, these unconditional go-agains are quite threatening. It's hard to know exactly what to do against them because on the one hand, there's the damage from the actual Dawnblade, and then on the other hand, there is the opportunity for other stuff. So the one downside is if I do play the hit and run, I'm not going to be able to follow up with the E-Strike, but I think in this situation it's fine. I'll put the E-Strike in Arsenal. So between the hit and run and the Brave Forge Bracers, I'm now coming in with this Dawnblade attack for Strength 6, which is almost as good as an E-Strike 7, and honestly might force more of a block because he doesn't want to give me the +1 counter. Then I'll be able to Arsenal the E-Strike and continue to be quite threatening for future turns. So Dorinthia putting the pressure on hit and run. One of the cool things about hit and run is that it combos with itself. So if you draw multiple copies of it, that can be very much to your advantage. You know, if you're playing that hit and run, and then you have another hit and run after it, you're going to get the stat buff as well as potentially profiting from the go again, depending on what else is in your hand. And this is a key benefit. You know, I've kind of transitioned from a Warriors Valor game plan to a hit and run game plan over time. And wow, my opponent goes for the total block here. He blocks with everything from his hand. He's actually going to block for 9 total to overblock in case I have an Iron Song response. And I am totally fine with that because it means that he doesn't have any stuff anymore, and his next turn is going to just be drying up. And now it's my next turn, and I'm going to be able to throw out more threats. And actually, this is looking like an extremely threatening hand. Because in this situation, I can do Spoils of War and Steelblade Supremacy, come in for 7 with go again, and if it hits, draw a card. And then if he blocks this heavily, which seems quite possible, I can follow up with E-Strike 7, which is also going to be extremely threatening. So, you know, very, very scary turn, all things considered. So this is coming in for 7 with go again, and if it hits, draw a card. That's very important to stop, and I am threatening an attack reaction of some type. And additionally, even if he does end up stopping this, you know, it'll be followed up by the E-Strike, which can then hit him hard for pure damage. So pretty nasty situation. We'll see what BigMedSi does in response to this. Honestly, he's in a pickle here as he's got 9 health, 9 life once you count his armor, and I have 21 or 22 depending. And I also have a tempo advantage. You really don't want to be at a tempo disadvantage against a warrior. Um, but I mean, Ninja's a tough class to play against warrior, especially with all these 2 block cards. So he is going to go, it looks like it's a triple block. Actually, it's a quadruple block. So he ends up blocking for a total of 10, which is the overblock that he needs in case I have the attack reaction. But I don't have the attack reaction. I have the E Strike 7. And in order to survive, my opponent breaks his Mask of Momentum and goes down to 1 life. So the game's not over yet, but it is sure looking good for me. That Mask of Momentum last ditch defense, saving him from the game ending right now, but it is not leaving him in a great position, especially because now if I draw a Steel Blade Shunt, I can kill him if he makes the Kadachi swing. So he's just going to take his Tunic and draw up, and now it is going to be my turn. Unfortunately for me, I've drawn a bit of an awkward hand. My best option is probably just to throw out a CNC here, but I don't. The Scar for a Scar does not have its go again since my opponent is far below me, and as a result, all I'm going to do is throw out the CNC. However, it's still going to be nice, especially if he has a handful of 2 blocks. It's going to be awkward to defend against. Lord Dorn, thanks for the follow. Much appreciated. So the Command and Conquer is now coming in for 6 damage total. And my opponent, unfortunately for me, does not have the double block with 2 3 blocks. Instead, he uses a 3 block and a 2 block and his Tunic. And that means that he now doesn't have a Tunic and isn't going to get the chance to play that. And I am going to draw up no Steel Blade Shunt, so I can't do the automatic kill or whatever if he comes in with those Kadachi. But still a pretty favorable situation. And I believe he pitches an Art of War there and then swings his next Kadachi. The Art of War, I'm fine with just taking damage there because his Kadachi doesn't have go again, so it's really not that threatening. And now on my turn here, once again, not the easiest hand to use, but it is going to be fairly strong in some ways because here what I can do is I can do Flock of the Featherwalkers, revealing the Iron Song response. I use my Tunic to do that, and you might ask, why don't you pitch the Iron Song response to play it instead? The answer is I don't want to show him that I have a Razor Reflex in hand, with which I can buff up this Flock of the Featherwalkers. So I'm coming in for only 5. But I can use the Razor to go up to 8, which will potentially kill him if he blocks for 5 or 6 or whatever and doesn't have a defense reaction. And once again, this is not the finest hand. This is not what I would most prefer to see for my own aggression. But I'm still able to get some threats thanks to the flexibility of Razor Reflex. So Razor Reflex, one of the reasons that it's so good is that it can apply not only to your sword attacks, but also to your generic attacks, which is why I prefer it over some of the warrior defense reactions. So my opponent, it looks like he's blocking 5, looks at some of the options that he has available. And let's see what happens next. There's the Razor Reflex coming in for 3, but he does have a Flick Flack in Arsenal to counter it. So the game's not over just yet. All right. Game's not over just yet, but I do now have that Quicken token, which is going to allow me to set up a big turn, potentially with the Command and Conquer that I still have in hand. However, my opponent comes in with a Kadachi swing, and this time I have drawn the Steel Blade Shunt, and there is the 1 point of unblockable damage coming in to close out the game. My opponent does not have a Sigil of Solace in hand to heal and escape, and Ninja cannot play Bonehead Barrier, so that 1 point of damage from the Shunt is going to end the game. And so that was, I believe, the semifinals of the UK tournament that I was playing, and this was an online league that was put on by the Flesh and Blood UK community. And I actually really like that. I've actually really enjoyed that community. I think that they've been putting on a lot of fun online events. So this one was from a little while ago. We were kind of digging into the archives a bit, but solid game there, and I was able to prevail over BigMedSi here. I have to say that I think that Warrior is a difficult matchup for Ninja in Classic Constructed at least. So the Classic Constructed, you can play like if you're playing a more aggressive Ninja deck, like an aggro Ninja with a lot of the go again stuff. All those 2 blocks are rough to have when you're playing against a Warrior. Now, The funny thing is that a control ninja build is actually, in my opinion, advantaged against warrior. But the problem is that control ninja has a like incredibly awful garbage matchup against dash, and if you're playing this deck where it just wants to like play attack reactions and slowly poke the opponent with karachis or whatever, and your opponent is like, okay, yeah, I'll take 1 or 2 damage a turn and set up all my items and then shoot multiple pistol shots, you're going to be in big trouble. So, in some ways, I think that Warrior would have a tougher time with Ninja if Dash did not have Warrior's back in a sense, which is funny because you think of Dash and Dorinthia as being kind of rivals in the top tier, but Dorinthia actually supports Dash in the broader meta perspective by going after some of the more aggressive decks. An aggro Dash deck, or I'm sorry, an aggro Katsu deck might be able to be very aggressive against Dash and get her before she sets up, but Dorinthia is a tough matchup for that. And similarly, Dash is actually covering Dorinthia from some of her bad matchups because a control or fatigue guardian is going to do very poorly against Dash a lot of the time, as is a control ninja. So it's kind of interesting that we see two high tier decks that kind of support one another in that they are each good against threats to the other and are kind of maybe preventing some of those threats from being more common in the meta. So a little interesting thing in the Crucible of War meta. It'll also be interesting to see how that evolves as we move into Monarch. And, given the new information, it sounds like that is going to be sooner rather than later. For those who may have missed the earlier discussion on stream, I started this one off with a little bit of discussion with respect to Flesh and Blood Monarch, where they posted the first look. They are saying that there is going to be the Monarch First Edition coming out, and it is going to be released in April, late April. And actually, there's one other piece of information that was quite interesting that I didn't discuss earlier, which is Monarch Unlimited has actually been announced for the 21st of May, with Monarch First Edition releasing on April 30th. And this actually means it will be less than a month from First Edition to Unlimited. And I think this is in some ways good news for people because there is already a lot of speculation about Monarch First Edition and whether or not it's going to be reasonable or unreasonable to take various pre-orders for it, whether or not there's going to be shortages, whether or not everyone is going to be sold out. So that's been a topic of some controversy in the community, and I think the fact that Unlimited is coming out so soon on its heels is going to mean that if the first edition does sell out, it won't be as catastrophic in terms of people's ability to actually get cards. So interesting little fact there. We're going to see what happens to the meta of Flesh and Blood as it evolves, but I personally am quite excited for Monarch, and we'll see what happens there. All right, guys, that's going to do it for this stream. We got a game. We had a game of Classic Constructed. We had a bit of discussion, and I am going to follow this one up on next Tuesday. We'll have what I believe is the finals of this event. So this was the semifinals, and I have, I believe, the final game coming up soon as well. So that's going to be on Tuesday, live at 5 o'clock Pacific, 8 o'clock Eastern. I will also be doing any incidental streams that come up. We might see, if there are some online events or if there are some games that just look cool that I want to cast, you may see that as well. So stay tuned for more. Sully G Dog says, thanks. See you later on. Yep. Thank you for watching. Much appreciated. And I will see you guys later with more Flesh and Blood content. Thanks for watching, guys.